Now, I can't even imagine, although I've tried, what excitement there would have been when Jesus began his ministry, turning water to wine, healing the sick, making the lame to walk, making the deaf to hear and the blind to see. Can you imagine what that would have been like? To come into a small community, which most of the little towns in Judea were small communities, and to have your neighbor raised from the dead, or your son healed. And the news spread throughout all Judea and Samaria and Galilee and on up into the other parts. Because this was new and exciting. And when Philip went down to Samaria in Acts 8 and he preached the gospel unto them, many of them hearing and seeing the miracles that Philip did, believed and were baptized. And Simon the sorcerer, who had bewitched people and tricked them, when he saw what Philip was doing and what Philip said, Simon believed and was baptized. And then, to his amazement, Philip was able to lay hands upon people after the apostles came. And the gift was given through the apostles' hands. And Simon, being the trickster that he had been, saw the opportunity. If I have that, what all could I do? The gifts were more important to a lot of people than the message that was preached. But I'm going to tell you very quickly, all of the gifts were temporary because the people who had them died. But the message was eternal life. That even though they died, they yet lived in the presence of God. So the truth of the matter is, the miracles were given to substantiate, to confirm, to validate that the message was a message come from God and was true. But what got people excited was not the message as much as it was the gifts. And so when Paul went to Corinth and he converted them and he laid hands upon them, and some of them had the gift of prophecy, and some of them had the gift of healing, and some of them had the various gifts. And he outlines those in chapter 12. And he explains that there were many, many gifts. But all of the gifts came from the same Spirit, and all of the gifts were given for the benefit of the body, not the benefit of the man that did the gift. And then he talks about it. He said, the greater gift of all the gifts that God has given us is not a miraculous gift. It's the gift of love. And love is the greatest gift because it will last forever. And so he describes unto them the gift of love and the gift of the gifts. And then he turns around and in chapter 14, he gives a procedure how they were supposed to use these gifts and how they were not supposed to use them because they were misusing the gifts. Now, 1 Corinthians 13 divides itself into two sections. Last week, Jeff talked about the first section. And he talked about how love was the greatest gift. And it really is. I am, and I say this without reservation, I'm proud to be a part of the group here. Because we came through this whole COVID problem with love and unity, taking care of one another, putting the needs of each other above our likes and our dislikes, for the self. And that's the way it ought to be. But you know why it happened? Because we love one another. And love is the greatest gift. But then Paul changes gears and starts now in what Brother Ken read to us, verses 8 through 13. And he's going to explain again one of the real reasons that the gifts are inferior to love is that, as I said before, love is eternal. And the gifts, they were temporary for a purpose. But that gets all confused. The reason is because the gifts are so exciting. And if I have this gift and I can do that, it draws a lot of attention to me. And look at me. But I didn't do it. The Spirit did it. He may have used me as a conduit, but I'm not the light. I'm not the fixture. I'm just a pathway. And so when we talk about these gifts, the Apostle Paul is going to lay before us now one exceedingly great, important concept, that the gifts are going to end. Now in this chapter, he's already outlined that there were many, many more gifts. But he's going to talk about 3 of them. And I think he was going to talk about the 3 that seemed to be of the most interest among the Corinthians, and probably would be among us if we had these. And so he's going to talk about the gift of prophecy, inspired teaching, the gift of tongues, the ability to speak in different languages without having studied that. I could have used that in high school. But this was a gift of speaking in different languages that were there. And then there was also the gift of knowledge. And I don't know what all they were able to know, but I know they didn't have to read it or study it. It was given to them by God. And so he uses these 3 gifts, and I believe he uses them simply to talk about all of the gifts. But if these are the most important ones to the Corinthians, not the most important ones to God, but the most important ones to the Corinthians, then he can show them that they are an inferior part of the plan of God compared to the love that you have for one another. And so they're a unit. And if you have one of the gifts, then we ought to be able to have all of the gifts. And that's the way Paul is going to outline this chapter. And he's going to talk about all knowledge and all revelation. So, we jump in. And he says, love never fails. But if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away with. If there are tongues, they shall cease. And if there is knowledge, it will be done away with. Now I want to emphasize, the gift of prophecy was temporary. The prophecies, they will be done away with. Not that the prophecy itself will fail, but the ability to give the prophecy was going to cease. And tongues, they will cease of themselves. And the gift of inspired knowledge, that was going to cease. God was going to quit giving the prophecies and the knowledge. And though He had given them the ability to speak in tongues, that's going to die out as they themselves got old and died out. But you know the interesting thing? Every commentary that I've ever read all said one thing about that section. those miraculous gifts were going to end. No debate on that. The only debate about that is when. And they come up with different solutions, but not all of them are true. And so we want to figure out, when did Paul say that the gifts were going to end? The way that they're going to end. Prophecy and knowledge shall pass away. God's simply not going to give any more prophecy at some point in time. But tongues will cease. As I said before, as the people that had that ability grew old and died, the tongues ceased. And so in order to show us this, the rest of this chapter, he's going to draw 3 contrasting pictures to show that which is temporary versus that which is permanent. To show how the gifts themselves were of a temporary and lesser value. He's going to talk about that which was in part versus that which is the whole of the parts. He's going to talk about how in childhood there were certain things that we did that we needed. But there's also maturity in which we don't need the childhood things. And finally, he's going to talk about seeing in a mirror as compared to face to face. And these are not 3 different illustrations of points. They're 3 different illustrations of the same point. And I just want to walk through them this morning as we look at them. When, and it was stated emphatically, when that which is perfect comes. Greek grammar, which you all don't need to know, and I am not a master of. This was a neuter thing, and it didn't refer to Jesus, who would have been masculine. And there's lots of problems beside that. But the gifts will end when that which is complete, that which is perfect, has come. But when that happens, faith is going to continue. But not only is faith, but hope is going to continue. And not only will that happen, but love will continue. So there's going to come a time when the gifts stop, but faith, hope, and love continue on. Now, I didn't put this into the chart. I wish I had. There will come a point in time when faith and hope end and love continues. That is when Jesus comes and we are caught up together to live with the Lord. But he's dealing with the first part here. Prophecies and knowledge and tongue. They will end when that which is perfect comes. But when that happens, faith, hope, and love will continue on. So we need to find a time when the one stopped but the other continued. And so we have to define, come to an understanding of what is it that was perfect. Now, I have argued with people, studied with people, who have argued that they could speak in tongues. The claim is there, the reality is not. I have talked with people that claim the ability or that they had seen miraculous healings. The claim is there, but the healings are not. And then wait a minute, I have never talked with anybody that said they had a revelation from God that they were willing to tack on to the end of Revelation. And so instead of 27 books, we now have 20 8 inspired messages from God. I've not run into anybody that wants to claim that. I don't put it beyond somebody somewhere. But this has the same problem. Really? More revelation? More prophecy? More inspired knowledge that we don't already have? Are we going to print it up and add it? Staple it to the back of our Bibles? So, as we look at this, one of the things that the church throughout the ages, even when it was wrong, even when it developed into the Catholic Church, and even when the idea was that the books that we have, they were inspired, but they didn't add others. And that has been true for 2,000 years. Amazing. But if the revelation is complete, then the gifts that would have confirmed any new revelation are superfluous. They're not needed. There's no revelation to confirm. So why would we have the confirming? And now abides faith. Do you have enough faith to go to heaven? Do you have enough knowledge to know what God wants you to do? Did God reveal Himself enough that I would know how to live? All Scripture is inspired of God and is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction in righteousness, that I can be complete, thoroughly furnished unto every good work. What has been revealed is sufficient. If we would pay attention to it, and that's a whole other sermon here. But when the perfect has come, then faith, hope, and love are going to continue. So what we have to do is back up now, and we're going to try to figure out what did Paul mean when he said that which is perfect. So you go look up the word. And by this I mean you go look up the Greek word that will tell you in English what the Greek word meant. And y'all can do that. I'll tell you which books to buy if you want to do this. But that word means brought to completion, complete, entire, as opposed to what is partial and limited. When we use the word perfect, we use that over here in the idea of no spot or blemish. And it can have that meaning. But the meaning that the word was more often used simply meant that which is complete, that which is entire, that which is not the partial or limited, but that which is complete. So there's something that was going to come that was going to be complete, and at which time the gifts were going to be done away with. Or again, Vine's Expository Dictionary said this word means signifying having reached. It's teleos, it's finished, it's complete. And he used the word perfect, but he means in the sense of complete. And again, there, that which is brought to its end, finished, wanting in nothing, necessary to completeness. Perfect. And the one thing that you see over and over and over again is whatever that word meant, it has the idea of that which is complete, that which is ended, that which is full, as opposed to that which is partial or not complete. What in the world did they have in Corinth that was incomplete but was going to be complete? It wasn't Jesus. Jesus was complete. But what they had was, Tom down here had the gift of knowledge. And Harold over here, he had the gift of prophecy. And Simon back there, he had the gift of speaking in languages. Now, I could go on and tell you all the other people, and you all realize I just made up names so that you can see this. So, over here, Tom has the gift, but only partial. He only knows what God tells him at that point in time. He doesn't know the prophecy that God is about to give to Harold. And so what happens is, what you begin seeing is, even though they had this gift of knowledge, of the revelation of God, they had it piece by piece. Part here, part there, part there. Part this week and part next week. Now I can tell you what you all can do. Grab the Bible in front of you and you have God's revelation. Not in part, but the whole. So the first contrast Paul made here was the idea of that which is in part becoming that which is complete. They're not two different things. We're not talking about the parts being one thing and the completes being something else. When I get all of the ingredients for a piece of pie, I'll have a Corvette. You're going, you don't make that comparison. When I get all the pieces of pie put together, you know what I have? I have a pie. When I get all the pieces of the Corvette and I get Jeff to put them together, then I have a Corvette. But whatever the pieces are, when they are complete, they're the same concept. And so what we have here, we're really talking about different quantities of whatever God was giving at that point in time. There's that which is in part, partial, a division. And there will be that which is complete of that. The in part was knowledge and revelation. Now, how do we know that they're really a revelation from God? And that's what the tongues were all about, and the other gifts. That they confirmed that what Tom and Harold up here were telling us that God said was really what God said. And so it was a package deal. And you had the revelation, but you had the confirmation of that. And so we now know. But our knowledge is in part. We don't have the completed revelation. There was still more to come. But together, it's going to make one complete unit. Let me give you an earthly illustration. You collect all of the bricks you want, because you're going to make a house or a wall. And so all of the bricks are pieces. But when the complete comes, there would be all the bricks put together, which would make the wall. Or you gather the lumber, and the boards one by one are the pieces. But when you get that which is complete, it's all of those pieces put together, and now what you have is, you have the house. And so it was with the revelation. The revelation was in parts and pieces. Part to Harold, part to Tom, But there was coming a point in time. Do y'all realize the New Testament we have is not written by one man? And it wasn't written at one time. Wasn't written, it was in part. But it came to be that when all the parts were gathered together, we now have the revelation of God, which is complete. So the in part becomes the complete. The gift of knowledge and revelation becomes the complete revelation of God. And then he gives a second illustration, the idea of childhood turning into manhood. So when we were children, there were things that were perfectly acceptable for children. Now, you all recognize there are things that are perfectly acceptable for 4-year-olds that are not really acceptable for 10-year-olds. And for those that are in childhood, as they become a man, they have to put away the childhood things. I used to use the word childish, and what I found was people that thought they still had the gifts thought I was calling the gifts childish. That's not at all. They were the childhood stage of the revelation. But now when the complete comes, the childhood stuff is put away. And that was the gift of language, the gift of prophecy, the gift of knowledge. And that gets put away so that we can now have the complete revelation from God. And then he has the third one. He's going to talk about seeing in a mirror darkly. Now, y'all got up this morning. I'm almost guaranteed every single one of you looked in a mirror. And one of my favorite statements is, mirrors don't lie. But sometimes they do. You all been to the fun house where they have the crazy mirrors? But normally, mirrors, and what we want, what we have, is we have mirrors that show us exactly what we look like, whether we like it or not. That is. But in the first century, they didn't have the ability to make mirrors like what you have in your wall in the bathroom. They reflected, but it was obscure. You didn't see clearly like we see now. So when he talks about in a mirror darkly, he's talking about what they would have seen when they looked into a first century mirror. And it would have been a clouded image and not the reality on that. So let me show you biblically. The word clearly or darkly here comes from the Greek word enigma. Well, that sounds like an English word. That's because we just took the Greek word and spelled it in English. But it has the same thing. That which is not clearly made known. That which is not clear in the understanding of that. Anything that is obscure or intimated. So, the opposite of darkly, enigma, would be what? My first inclination was it has something to do with light. So if that was dark, this would be light. And that didn't make a lick of sense, and it doesn't on that. Because when we're talking about that which is dark, we're talking about that which is obscure, that which is not clear. So what is the opposite of obscure and not clear? That which is clear, understandable, clearly to see the picture of what is going on. So for example, the Lord spoke with Moses face to face at the mountain out of the midst of the fire. But as he talked with the other people, he said, I will speak by mouth to him, but clearly and not in riddles. But to the rest of the people, what he spoke was unclear. Interesting. What most people, when they read that, have walked away with this idea. I can't wait till I get to heaven when I know everything. That's not going to happen. And I have a feeling if God tried to explain it to you, it'd be over your head. But I wait to see what we do or don't know and what to... But that's not the contrast. The contrast is not now versus heaven. The contrast is when they have that which is in part versus when they have that which is the whole. And that which they had in part was the gifts of knowledge and prophecy. And what they ended up with the whole was whole of the revelation that could be clearly seen and read. It is the difference between that which was partial with that which was complete. And the partial was the knowledge that was given, and the complete is the revelation that is clear. The Apostle Paul said in Ephesians 4, when he talked about this, or Ephesians 3, that was given unto him this knowledge, whereby when you read, I'm just seeing if any of y'all know the rest of that sentence, whereby when you read, you may understand that which was in part can be understood. And those things are referred to something else. We have the something else. And so we can put the references together, and we have the picture of this. And so what we have today is we have that which is perfect and complete in the revelation. The prophecies and the knowledge have been gathered together. The will of God has been revealed unto us, and it's been confirmed. I didn't put this on the screen, but make a note of this, go home and read it. Hebrews chapter 2. It was confirmed unto us by those that heard it. This is what you have. Not a figment of somebody's imagination, but a revelation from God that came with the confirmation of the miracles, and thus we now have the completed revelation and knowledge of that, whereby when we read, we may understand. So I'm going to just give you an illustration. Preach this gospel unto every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. I was studying with a fellow one time, and he was teaching something different, and I said, would you read Mark 16, verse 15 and 16 to me, please? So he opened up his Bible, and he read to me out of his Bible. And when he got done reading that, he looked at me and he said, that's just your interpretation. I said, excuse me? I didn't interpret it. I haven't told you what I think it means. I'll tell you what you just did. You read the text and you understood it. And then you denied it. Now you've said that that's the way I would have understood it. And you're only right on that last point. That's exactly the way I understand it. But that's the way you understood it. You know why? Because that's what it means. Whereby we can read this revelation from God. Some things harder to understand than others. But it has a meaning. And apply yourself. Now, which is more important? The confirmation of the revelation or the revelation? And I'm going to tell you, for our day and time, the revelation is what was important. Because through that, I am informed how I can be right with God. Far, far greater. And that relationship is going to go through eternity. That knowledge is going to get me into the very presence of God forever. And for all that will listen. So, what do we do with chapter 13? I'll tell you, my idea is understand it. And this is the way I read it and understand it and have defined the words. And when you come to a passage and you've understood it, hold to it, stick with it, and above all, do it and obey it. And if you've never obeyed the gospel, now is the time. If there's parts of it that you have put away and you want to come back, we'll be glad to pray with you and help you. Whatever that is and however we can help you. We invite you to come as we stand and sing.